I took my very silly 18 Centurions army to the Winchester GT, a 2-day, 5-game 40k tournament for another shot at trying to prove that my favorite unit is in fact the best unit in the entire game. And it nearly destroyed me. I'm telling you, I came this close to greatness. Never have I played this many games in a row that came down to the narrowest of margins. I had to play down to the final minutes with my brain running on full power the entire time. This event was the most difficult, most stressful, and most exhausting I've ever played, but was also the most fun, exciting, and fulfilling at the same time. I am fighting tooth and nail to the very last second, over and over and over again, game after game after game, only to lose by such a minuscule amount that a single die roll or card draw or minor decision would have meant glorious victory instead of crushing defeat. My perfect 40% win rate stats do not do justice to how much better I've been playing. My win rate may stay the same, but instead of those losses being quick demolitions, they are hard-fought, nail-biting slugfests. All I'm doing at these tournaments is putting way more effort into getting the exact same result again and again. I'm losing my fucking mind. Just to show you the magnitude of how close things are getting, my past 5 losses have been a victory points difference of 2, 3... Okay, 24. That one wasn't very close. But then 3 again, and then my most recent defeat, 1 point. 1! Alright, let's stop descending it into a madness spiral and talk about the Winchester GT. I'll spare you the tournaments are good actually spiel, but you should check them out, whatever your skill level or list. They're a great way of meeting new people and playing great games of 40k. My 18 Centurion list is unchanged from my previous RTT, taking the lessons from the London GT by combining my Assault Centurions into one big unit of 6, and making room for some Vanguard veterans with Inferno pistols to go with Strike by swapping the Lone Op Hammer Captain for a Lone Op Phobos Lieutenant. I really like this model. It's kind of like a pseudo combi lieutenant, but it's very funny having a character that has a Lone Op, Stealth, Deep Strike, Scouts, and Infiltrate. But despite how silly this list is, it wasn't even the craziest list at this event. Shout out to Chewie and his Oops All Dreadnoughts list, and my first opponent who had brought his Narrative Crusade army for a spin at a competitive event, playing Space Marines without any epic characters, Gladius Task Force without Calgar or Gulliman. In my competitive 40k, it's more likely than you think. Game 1 was against Charles and his... Wait, sorry, I've misread his name here. Let me try that again. Game 1 was against Charles and his Nova Marines Crusade Force. Charles was a super nice guy with a list that doesn't take many characters, but has a smattering of Space Marine favorites, like a big block of Stern Guard, company heroes, and as many small units of anything that starts with IN, including Invader ATVs, Indicators, and Gladiator Lancers. The mission is Terraform on the Sweeping Engagement deployment. There are a couple of cross-map sightlines, but otherwise a decently dense map with both natural expansions being well defended and the center map being a bit more exposed. I won the roll-off and chose Defender so I could get my infiltrators off first. I wanted to get my Blade Guard down on his natural expansion to be a menace. This angered Charles. No, I'm not going to yell his name anymore. That joke is over and there's a lot more video to go and my throat is starting to hurt already. I dropped my Phobos Lieutenant just in the center so I could scout back if I went second, but otherwise I'm mostly stuck to the left of the board with just my Assault Centurions ready to move on to the right objective early to try and gum up the works. He'll struggle to kill them with anything but the vehicles he has, and those vehicles are going to need to expose themselves to get in range to shoot the chunky flamer lads, so I felt pretty safe overall. Charles drops his 2 big scary gladiators to make sure I didn't try and get cheeky, ready to pop out and cover this sightline with his bulky Stern Guard near the middle, and he put his Vindicators with the Cursor filled Impulsor on the left because that was his natural expansion and he wanted it back. And to be fair with getting the first turn, yes, he does indeed get it back, sending the full force of his army directly into those Blade Guard. Drawing Area Denial and Recover was a decent draw as well, as he advances his scouts towards the center to get full Area Denial. I should have moved my Phobos Lieutenant when scouting to a place that was at least 6 inches away, but I didn't really think about it, to be honest. He did forgo doing any recover assets actions, instead going all in to attack my Blade Guard with enough Incursor Mines, grenades, API charge mortars, and melee and company heroes melee to get through them all. This is where I think I made a critical mistake, and something that I never really think about because I get so hyper-focused on dealing with a threat. In this case, the company heroes. They were exposed to not only my 6 Devastator Centurions that I didn't need to teleport, but also my Inferno pistol-wielding Vanguard veterans with Shrike. I could take a lot of his force back. If he really wants this flank, he'll have to work for it. And although he has some Inceptors ready to deep strike 6 inches away, I reckon I've got the firepower, especially with potentially even more Centurions coming down later, to annihilate most of his army. I sent my army in to deal with as much as I could. And those company heroes were not as tanky as I thought they could be, and they were easily destroyed. And that allowed Shrike to start cleaning up a lot of the threats. However, what I really should have done is pick up Shrike's unit at the end of Charles's turn, drop them down to deal with his combi lieutenant, and used my intercessors to screen a bit, sent my JPIs onto the objective to just hold it with their buff OC to slow down the scoring, and set up to take a stranglehold on the right side of the map for turn 2. Those Vindicators are a 24-inch range, so wouldn't be able to do much and would have to drive over, and I could stay out of harm's way of the Gladiators. Instead, I made this game a lot harder for myself, but also this is way cooler. Charles is ready to fight back, bringing in his nasty Stern Guard to take the midboard and bringing around the Vindicators to start blasting. The Gladiators are a bit hesitant to do much, worried that coming out too far will give my Assault Centurions a perfect charge target. The Assault Centurions will easily take a Gladiator in combat, and on top of that, giving me the opportunity to move more than 4 inches is extremely powerful. And these guys do love a long charge roll. He draws a tempting target and extend battle lines. Extend battle lines is done. That's already a given, but a tempting target will be trickier. I chose to pick my natural expansion. Currently, we contest this, so he'd either have to try and bring his scouts back to take it, or kill my combi lieutenant with his own. And he can't charge too close to my Assault Centurions, as I could heroically intervene and dump too much OC on the point. He can't drop any Inceptors to get onto the point, or put them anywhere to shoot at me. So Charles ignores that secondary and instead electing for the free command point for discarding it and continues his plan of going all in. However, things didn't work out too well for Charles. He doesn't deal as much damage as he would have liked to my army, taking out only one Devastated Centurion and leaving Shrike alive. A few low rolls and the nasty Shadowmark Talon detachment rule come in clutch in keeping a lot of my units alive. But I did have some problems to deal with. He is very much encroaching on my home objective with 3 annoying Inceptors right by it for next turn, so I can't ignore them. On my turn 2, I draw my cards and I get extend battle lines and a tempting target. This is truly the mirroriest of mirror matchups. Charles, of course, chooses his natural expansion for a tempting target, so I figured, you know what? Fine. I've weathered a lot of the storm, and I have a perfect place to drop down my big squad of Devastated Centurions to annihilate his Stern Guard with blast missiles, as well as an Oathed Gladiator, and well out of range of his Vindicators. He can bring the tanks around to deal with them, then the Assault Centurions would be primed to get stuck in and eventually get to his home field objective. So I drop both JPI units in the back with my Shan reroll on his ATV to ensure at least one squad gets in and can flip at the point, alongside my remaining reserve Centurions to blow up a few more threats. However, things don't work out too well for me. I didn't deal as much damage as I would have liked to his army, taking out the Stern Guard, but leaving the Gladiator on 5 wounds remaining. I don't manage to take out all the Inceptors, and his Vindicator remains relatively unscathed. I do manage to pick up a tempting target, giving me some leeway on the score, but I need to start terraforming to undo some of the damage. So, battle round 3 begins, and both of us are looking at the board state. Our supposed go turns did not manifest as we would have liked. We're both in a position of wondering, what on earth do we do now? And thus began a very long battle round 3 that leaves us with very little time at the end of the game, because we'd already just had a very long battle round 2 because there were so many decisions and so much action. Now, to be clear, this isn't a case of slow play. Yes, we did not manage to get to round 5, but this is a case of both of us having a lot of options and a lot of decisions to make on how to get the most out of our remaining units. Charles had a lot of tanks left, but not much in the way of scoring units, and I had a lot of Centurions, but was going to be very swiftly running out of fast-moving scoring units as well. Sabotage and established locust secondaries for Charles doesn't help him either. He needs to do damage. So once again, elects to ignore secondaries and just try and kill me so that I basically cannot do anything and he can pick up the points later. The biggest problem for Charles is those Assault Centurions. He wants to bring his Gladiators round, but he can't move the Oathed one without being Oathwatched, and he can't bring his Vindicators too close in fear of getting charged. Whilst he does set himself up for a decent turn 4 primary by moving the Vindicator to the center and continuing to pressure my home field, he does elect to move one of his Vindicators back to deal with the JPIs who failed the charge previously. But again, with a poor roll, it doesn't kill them all. He also doesn't manage to kill my Devastated Centurions, leaving 2 alive, which he charges with his intercessors to try and lock up. In my turn 3, I get Cleanse and bring it down. I use my stratagem to fall back and shoot on the 2 remaining Dev Cents and oath a moment the Vindicator that is approaching the center of the board. I could have gone for the 5-wound Gladiator, but the only target it had was the Centurions, which were likely going to be dead anyway, and I had 3 other Centurions primed on the Vindicator, and 5 shots is better than 2.
The numbers don't lie!
I was thinking of trying a long charge with the Assault Centurions, but they're actually doing more work on that objective by just standing there menacingly, which means I can at least get Terraform going. My Phobos Lieutenant, which somehow survived on a single wound, allows me to get another Terraform off once the Vindicator was deleted, and I just had to try and hold back as much as I could from my deployment zone on the left. At this point, we were basically out of time, and had kindly come to visit me so we could have lunch. She arrived in time for me to basically ignore her and finish off the game because we were rapidly approaching the point where we might have actually failed to split scores in time. But we worked out that in the final 2 turns, I would get 20 primary and 8 secondary, and Charles would get 22 primary and 10 secondary, which gives us a final score of 72 to 64, granting me a narrow, hard-fought victory and multiple handshakes and good games because of how insanely close it was. It came down to Charles doubling down in rounds 2 and 3 to go for the throat instead of scoring. Of course, had he gone for scoring, he may have been less likely to be able to score in turns 4 or 5, but he lost out on a minimum of 10 points. A kill secondary, like no prisoners or storm hostile, would have been insane for him at this point, but unfortunately that was not the hand he was dealt. I felt like I played okay, but definitely made it harder for myself by being too focused on the scary threat. I could have played a more measured game, still picked up the company heroes, but set myself up and used my movement tech to break the Nova Marines' ankles as they scrambled to run across the map. I need to make sure I don't get focused on a scary threat and only plan to deal with it by killing it. Instead, I need to make sure I use my speed and movement tricks to outmaneuver them. So anyway, after some nice lunch, I went into game 2 and immediately made the exact same mistake again. I have learned nothing! Game 2 was against Nathan, his awakened Dynasty Necrons. Nathan was a super nice guy, especially as he was nice enough to set to the table whilst I sat there eating a sandwich with... I at least provided my objective markers that you can buy as Fall of Valor stuff on shop, and I did set up my side of the board eventually after scarfing my sandwich as fast as possible. Nathan's Necron list has a unit that I've dreaded coming up against, the Technomancer-led Canoptic Wraiths. These are some of the tankiest motherfuckers in the entire game. The only thing I can think of that is tankier is my Macro Supernova for table.stronghold.com. That's right, I'm such an advertising menace that I'd interrupt the list analysis for the sponsor time. Whether you're a weird skew list champion or a meta-chasing coward, the best way to transport your minis is with the Macro Super over table.stronghold.com. If you haven't yet got a Macro Super O or MDF terrain, then your life is severely diminished because you are not enriching yourself with the power of magnets. Right now, you can use my code 425 for 25% off, and just like the deepest recesses of every media fandom ever, there's free shipping as well. You might think this is an advertisement, but it's not. It's an instruction. Buying a Macro 2.0 or MDF terrain using my links below is non-negotiable. The Magnet Wizard and I will be watching you like a hawk. Buy it now. Canoptic Wraiths are T6, 4 wounds each, 3 up save, 4 up inborn, and a 5 up feel no pain with the Technomancer. With the Necron's general stickiness because of reanimation protocols, you've got a lot to chew through. And on top of that, Nathan's list is a whole host of tough, nasty destroyers, and 2 horrific Doomsday Arcs on top of that. The mission is Hidden Supplies on the Search and Destroy deployment, which is normally one of my best deployments because it allows me to very easily get back up in place for my natural expansion objective. Deployment is fairly standard on both sides, and I get the first turn. I make 2 immediate critical mistakes here, which are a result of not coordinating my high-level plan with my actual moves. First, I Oath of Momented Saraz, who is an absolute murder machine. I basically want to discourage him from trying to run at me early. That doesn't really help when my next move is to throw my Assault Centurions forward onto this center objective. I was trying to limit test this list to see if these 6 Assault Centurions can do enough to bait people out for a retaliation and still be annoying and tough enough to stick around. Turns out the answer to that question is that no, not really. On Nathan's turn, he does bring out the Wraiths, and I elect to try overwatching them with my big block of Flamers, which is what they're designed to do. That's why I put them there. My goal was to make sure at the very least, even if I do die, the Wraiths will be on that objective and be in line for some teleporting dev sense. So... why, past Paul, did you Oath of Moment goddamn Saraz? Oath the Wraiths, dumbass! +1 to wound would have gone so hard with that Flamer Overwatch, as you really have to ensure that you're killing full models in Necrons. I don't manage to get through any of them, and the Centurions go down to a combination of Locust Destroyers and the Wraiths. But they are where I want them, so I at least get that. So the problem is that Necrons are very tanky, and even though those Wraiths are where I want them, it's also where Nathan wants them. I do manage to destroy those Wraiths eventually, but my 6 Devastating Centurions only kill 5, which includes Overwatch in Nathan's turn 2, and it's down to melee to finish them off. The rapid ingress to a Doomsday Arc on the other side of the board out of my range, so I had to just sit there and stare down the barrel of my demise. He rolls hot, and I do not, losing 4 of my 6 Dev Sense instantly. Incidentally, the other Doomsday Arc did fuck all this game, but this one was somehow an absolute beast. Now, to be fair to me, I do actually take out a large chunk of his army, including characters who I have to fight twice because of the protocol of the Eternal Revenant stratagem. I even managed to kill Saraz twice, using basically every trick in my book, which was my moral victory after I saw that I could not catch up in points. I do also want to highlight one play I did that I am actually quite proud of, that did at least stop some points and grant me a turn of full primary. About round 3, Saraz charged some remaining JPIs, and I used Heroic intervention on this group of JPIs in the ruin. I wasn't doing this to try and kill Seraz, although the Hammer of Wrath Mortals did help a little bit. It was to basically flip the objective with my OC2 bodies. Heroic intervention is one of the stratagems that I've just not been utilizing, and it can really swing games because it can get you into combat on your opponent's turn. And combined with Feint and Thrust for Shadowmark Talon, you can do some really nasty stuff with it. It made a difference to the score, but not to the result here, sadly. But it's definitely something that you could use to do really nasty things with, especially on, say, Assault Centurions. Foreshadowing is a literary device in which a 67 to 91 defeat, but again, scoring decently even in loss, and not getting completely overrun. I kept it relatively competitive, and most importantly, it was still a great, fun game against an awesome opponent. Something I get asked a lot is what my favorite army to play against is, and I don't really understand why people ask that question. I really don't care which army I play against. What actually matters is the player. My army is going to have some tough matchups, and sometimes I get completely annihilated. Even in my most brutal losses against top players like Ben's Orcs, Adam's World Eaters, and my worst loss ever, Connor's Dark Angels, I still have fun because of the person across the table from me. I would rather play against the most brutal, disgusting, meta hard counter army played by a super nice guy than go against an army that I can perfectly counter myself, played by a dickhead. As a perfect example of this, my first game was against JP, who is a goddamn motherfucking piece of shit guard player, but otherwise a super nice guy. JP is an absolute legend. If I may shamelessly rip off Crackduck for a moment, he is one of, if not the friendliest player at the Winchester events. And this game would actually be a rematch after he narrowly defeated me in the last one-day event in a pre-lunch slobber knocker of 88 to 90. That game came down to some interesting rolls on both sides, but also my greed, trying to split fire 3 Centurions against a 4-wound Dawn and a 1-wound Russ, and killing neither, which is especially a problem for me as Shadowmark Talon giving -1 to hit a range means that a degraded tank is functionally identical to an undamaged tank. That is frankly completely unfair, and no, I'm not salty. You're salty, you guard playing tank spamming little bitch. JP's list is a little bit different from our previous bout, dropping a tank and some characters with some suicide melter horses, a big squad of Bullgrin, and some Ratlings. This time we're playing on the Crucible of Battle deployment with the mission Scorched Earth. The terrain here is quite interesting. I do quite like this map. There's only one real firing line from deployment to deployment, as this one here is a lot harder to navigate than you might think, with these pieces of terrain making such a narrow line that it's very easy to avoid. The other area of note is the center. Basically 2 staging areas that can get a lot of bodies onto the objective, and charging through might not be as desirable as you think, with the open space to be ambushed on the other side. For deployment, I think JP and I basically had the same idea. A Mexican standoff. He dropped a Rogal Dawn right in line with my deployment, and I wasn't going to be shown as a coward, so I dropped my Centurions right back. If I go first, that Dawn is dead, but if JP goes first, my best unit is in jeopardy. Otherwise, a fairly standard deployment both sides, with JP's only infiltrators, the Ratlings, taking his natural expansion. Whilst I was tempted to go nuts and plonk my Blade Guard dead center, I decided to take my time and ensure my own expansion would be safe, placing them behind the room with Shrike's entourage behind that to counterpunch any guardsmen that might get a little bit over-eager. JP wins the first turn roll-off and gets his legion of pathetic non-super soldiers up to swamp the middle objective with infinite OC, and brings a Lehman Russ around to take aim at my big dev sense along with the Rogal Dawn commander. The Screaming Raymonds are very used to this by now and weren't going to let some pitiful pot shots from a couple of tanks break their resolve, and proceeded to tank everything. Only one model took damage, leaving it with 1 wound, but otherwise remained fully operational. Going second turned out to be a blessing because JP had brought some Kassakin forward that I could draw a bead by slightly moving my mighty 4-inch forward. I put Oath of Moment on the Dawn, and in a greedy move again, split-fired the las cannons into it and the missiles into the Kassakin. The Kassakin did not stand a chance against 6 D3 plus 12 strength 9 AP2 D3 damage blast missiles, but JP immediately uses reinforcements on them so they can come back later, basically undoing my work. At least he can only do that once per game, but I still need to be cognizant of them being able to suddenly drop down with a surprisingly nasty firepower. To make this play mean anything, it would come down to saves on the Rogal Dawn. JP pops smoke with his final command point, but I'm still hitting on 3s with rerolls thanks to Strike from the Shadows and Oath of Moment, and rooting on 3s thanks to rerolls from Twin Linked and the better Oath of Moment, which I finally have access to without any more ambiguity. I get all 6 shots through, and JP only makes 2 saves, which were 5-up saves thanks again to Strike from the Shadows. No, I don't remember the proper name of that strat in Shadowmark Talon. I will continue to call it Strike from the Shadows because it's a better name. So all I need to do now is just not whiff the damage. And fortunately, I do not. So I finally achieved something that I have not actually been able to do this entire year. killing a Dawn. Across the rest of the board, I move my JPIs up to charge into his dudes on the center objective to try and take positions and score my secondaries, with the Assault Centurions rolling a mighty 6 on their advance roll to move a staggering 10 inches up to the wall to back them up. I also decided to go for broke and charge the Leman Russ with my Blade Guard to lock it in melee, but those AP2 damage 2 hits and Judicia Dev wounds somehow managed to take 6 wounds off of it. The JPIs were not as successful as I would have hoped, unfortunately, not managing to wipe the squad of Krieg and actually losing models in the fight back. The audacity of these lowly guardsmen, and to make matters worse, I didn't have enough OC to flip the objective, giving me a very lackluster first turn of scoring. JP's turn 2 and he sees his opening. The Kasrkin return to help thin the JPIs and back up the ball grid that are ready to charge in and take a proper hold of the midboard. But the big play from JP is with Gaunt's Ghosts, who finds a perfect little spot in my deployment zone where I've left Athan Shan exposed. This is bad. This is critically bad. If I lose Shan, I lose my ability to teleport my Centurions for free, and losing that this early would be a disaster. Shan at least has stealth. The Gaunt's Ghosts are -1 to hit, even though they are close. That's a lot of nasty shots that could easily kill Shan. I have to use Armor of Contempt, mostly just to make sure those damage 3 shots are saving on 3s, not 4s. But it isn't going to help Larkin's Long Lads, which is a mighty 4 damage. The sneaky squad leap out of the bush, catching the winged warrior off guard. And...
You motherfucker!
the only chance now was to fix bayonets and get that 9-inch charge. JP rolls an 8. Hey, at least he got behind enemy lines for 3 points, right? It only gets worse for JP as the melee-locked Russ elects to remain where they are, and Big Guns never tires into the Vanguard Veterans and the Assault Centurions, only managing to pick up a single Vanguard Vet and slightly wounding a Centurion. His Bullgrim make it into combat, but seeing an opportunity, I use Heroic Intervention on the Assault Centurions to get them involved in the brawl out of sequence, which will end up having disastrous consequences for the Emperor's finest. JP does get rid of the remaining JPIs and finishes off the wounded Centurion with the Bullgrim's heavy hands, but the Centurions get their revenge, destroying 3 of the Bullgrim with their even heavier hands attached to very heavy giant siege drills. And finally, to turn this horror show into a veritable waking nightmare, the Blade Guard, without Oath of Moment, managed to kill the Leman Russ in the second round of combat. That frees them up on my turn to bring them forward to take out the second squad hiding in the ruin. My turn 2, and I know that JP has some nasty horsey lads in reserve, and I don't want them to come onto my field in my backlines to wreak havoc. I've got incredibly lucky and got away with making a massive mistake leaving Shan exposed, so I made sure to teleport my 6 Centurions, bring in 1 of my 3 squads of DevSense, and remaining JPIs just to screen the entire backfield and remove Gaunt's Ghosts with a barrage of missiles. The Assault Centurions, who had heroically intervened, found themselves in a perfect position to feint and thrust their way out of combat with the Bullgrid, just enough to fry those pesky respawning Kasrkin. Those Kasrkin did not have a good day, firstly getting bombarded with enough missiles to level a building, only to be reborn and thrown onto the battlefield in front of 5 very angry walking tanks with flamethrowers. After that, the Centurions were able to charge back into the Bullgrid, but due to that mountain of meaty muscle behind slab shields, left 1 Bullgrin alive with just a single wound left. Shrike and the Blade Guard moved up to make quick work of any remaining Kriegsmen that dared to try to sit on the central objective, and with my backlines protected, I have an extremely secure position that JP's guard is going to have to fight through. But unlike me, the Emperor's finest are brave, and their resolve does not wane in the face of adversity. Acadians move forward, leaving a couple of models on the objective to keep hold of his home, but bringing the good guns up to blast away the Blade Guard. Leman Russ and Rogal Dawn Commander drive up and level their turrets at the Vanguard Veterans, exposed in the center, along with some pesky rattlings running up and down a building to get plunging fire on Shrike. Not that they really needed to, as the absurd amount of guns from the tanks made light work of both Shrike and his entire squad. As this is turn 3, JP has to bring on his horses, and there isn't a much better place, or in fact any place, to bring them on. So they arrive fairly unceremoniously near his deployment zone, but at least ready to get involved and lance anything that dares to get close. The Kasrkin holding this objective moved out to throw a mine at my Centurions, taking down another one, and then charged in to try and keep them from making any further moves up the board. But between them and the Bullgrin, they were unsuccessful in thinning the Centurions further, and the devastating amount of swings into that last standing but definitely now concussed Bullgrin takes him down. My turn 3, and with the amount of damage I've done, there was simply not enough left for JP to stop me executing what this army is designed to do. That heroic intervention was massive, because it meant now that I can feign to thrust again, playing with the Kasrkin, again, but now charge into the Lehman Russ. That 4-inch move doesn't mean much when you can get an insane slingshot like this. With a massive gap in the backline, I can drop 9 Centurions right into the corner of his deployment zone, and with the Cadians having to stay on the objective and remain in line of sight, I can fire 63 plus 18 shots onto the big 15 model Cadian unit. They did not stand a chance. The 6 las cannons from them plus the 3 in front on the second squad eviscerate the smokescreen Dawn, and those 3 also managed to pick up another squad of Kaskin attempting to move up and help secure the objective. The Assault Centurions get into the Lehman Russ and gets a total of 8 extra hits thanks to their ability, and adding a total of 27 damage to that Russ that didn't even have the decency to explode. JP, left with a few scant horses and some rattlings, couldn't do anything to pick up the pieces. He does get the Rough Riders into the Centurions and mercilessly runs them down. Those Melter Lances are extremely potent when they get a full run-up, but they cannot do anything to stop the incoming devastation from all the Centurions. A 93 to 66 victory. Delightful. As the saying goes, revenge is a dish best served hotter than the sun fired out of 18 walking tanks. I'm very much looking forward to our decider. JP is an absolute delight to play against, and I do love being able to have the chance to kill as many Rogal Dawns as I can to calm my burning hatred of those bastard gun bricks. So, day 1 down and a 2-1 record. I'm very happy with that. A very tough, strategic, and suspenseful victory followed by a couple of fun, but at least slightly less taxing games. In game 2, I was getting to that point where I'm like, oh god, I have so many ideas, I'm running out of time, I really need to make a decision very quickly, and I was getting into a bit of a panic in round 4 before Mark the TO came around to the tables to tell us we had an hour left, which meant I had a chance to slow down a bit and think. Game 3 versus JP was just a fun game, but I can't deny that I made out like an absolute bandit with some of those rolls. They didn't all go my way, but it's worth highlighting the good luck because it is easy to get hung up on the rolls that don't go your way that do change the game massively, like failing a critical last-minute battle shock or getting a double 1 on a 3-inch charge. Foreshadowing is whatever happens, day 2, I'm guaranteed to be at least 2-3 to continue my perfectly consistent 40% win rate, which I'll be very happy with. I just hope that I have 2 fun games against 2 great opponents that aren't balanced on a knife's edge for all 5 rounds down to the very last minute and leave me in a broken, exhausted, mind-destroyed husk by the end of the day. So, in and out, 2-game adventure. Game 4 was against Joe, who was a super nice guy, and this was his first big event. He even let me know that he was inspired by watching my videos to sign up, and told me he had a great time so far. So it was up to me not to ruin everything. No pressure. Joe had brought Lions of the Emperor Custodes and a list full of the toughest infantry you can find. Lots and lots of golden armored demigods. Well, lots and lots relative to Custodes, I guess. There are still only 42 models, and 14 of those are either Sisters of Silence or the 2 allied characters. The mission is taken hold with the Search and Destroy deployment again, and I deployed fairly badly. I called this deployment, please God, don't hurt me, oh God, oh Jesus, don't get near me, oh God, stop, get back, oh God, where I've positioned everything as far back as I can with infiltrated characters there just to distract and disrupt. This is a pretty bad deployment for a couple of reasons. 1, if I get area denial or established locus or any other secondary turn 1 that requires being near or on the center objective, I'm fucked. 2, whilst I can teleport myself around, my fast units are so far back that I can't really pivot based on Joe's movement. I mostly do this to make sure that there is no chance for any advanced and charge shenanigans, as the Blade Champions being in my face early would be disastrous, and I want to play a bit slower, carve out space for my Centurions to drop in and shoot away approaching threats, and then slowly move across and choke out the board. I'm also going first, which isn't ideal, but not the worst, as I can set up a bit more of my position. And I got very lucky with my cards. Secure and extend, very easy points early doors. The issue is that Custodes have a lot of deep strike, they can uppy downy, and Joe can split his Terminator units into individuals who can then get massive board presence and lock me out of scoring. On top of that, the 2 big blocks of Wardens, one with Valerian, are near impossible to chew through when they pop their 4-up Feel No Pain. Early on, I managed to take out Valerian's squad and leave just Valerian wounded with a combination of Centurions and Blade Guard, but those Blade Guard got destroyed by the second unit coming in. That took another lot of chewing through, but I did eventually manage it. We traded primary all game, neither of us being able to start a turn with a secure foothold on the center, and as the game progressed and the points remained neck and neck, I was starting to slowly make ground, leaving Joe with not many models left, but whilst there weren't many, they were still very tough and they were in horrible positions for me. Shrike and Shan were both still alive, although Shrike was flying solo by this point after the squad had been brutalized by the Custodians. Shrike did manage to take out Draxus with precision, but even with Oath of Moment, I didn't get through enough damage to destroy her squad, and eventually they got overrun, with Shrike just managing to come out on top in the end. It all came down to the center, and in round 4, I drew Assassination with a few characters exposed. I had to bring Shan out to play to go in with Shrike into a shield captain. He could interrupt, and he has an ability to reduce damage to 1, so I needed both Shan and Shrike in there so that Shan Shan, with his sustained hits 2 and rerolls from Oath, can hopefully weight of dice his way through the Shield Captain. And Shrike would be there to be the sacrificial lamb if the Shield Captain stays alive and Joe wants to interrupt to take out one of the 2 clawed combatants. So my charge phase, let's get Shan involved and... God damn it! Shrike does get in, but does not do enough. He has a good go, but he is taken out. I do get assassination, but I get those 5 points a turn late. And in Joe's turn 4, the exposed Shan goes down easily, meaning I can't get my free uppy downy, and I have no command points left. My 6 squad of Centurions are stuck in the bottom left corner doing nothing. Fortunately, I had some JPIs that charged into some Sisters of Silence. Turns out they were some very tough, not dying Sisters of Silence for some reason. And in my turn 5, I had the chance to stop Joe's defend stronghold and put enough OC on there to make it extremely tricky to take back. This would hopefully prevent Joe from getting 15 points on primary at the end of his turn. I use the Fainted Thrust to fall back from the Sisters in order to then shoot and charge into the Gladius, and Joe elects to overwatch as I fall back with Sisters. The Flamers aren't going to do much damage, but they will force a Battle Shock test, and if I fail, I get OC 0. I roll a 5. Okay, fine. I can at least still kill the Gladius. There's no reason not to overcharge the plasma at this point because I don't really mind if I lose models because they aren't going to be doing anything to hold the point. And with that, I do kill the Gladius. But I also lose both plasma guns to Hazardous. That means I am now 2 for 2 on losing both plasma guns when I overcharge them. God, I hate overcharging plasma. But hopefully I've done enough damage to secure a win. It's going to come down to card draw. With that blunder, Joe will be able to have 3 objectives. All he needed to do was walk one of his remaining solo Custodes onto the middle of the board. And because I couldn't teleport my Centurions around, I couldn't be in position to overwatch. Engage at all fronts, extend battle lines. 6 points total from secondaries gives Joe the extremely close and extremely clutch victory. I lose 77 to 80. If Shan had made that charge, or if I'd managed to flip the top objective, things would have been different. But again, that's the nature of a dice game. And there are other things I could have done, I'm sure. I've had games that have been closer at the end where one dice roll decides the game, but this game was close and had those kind of rolls and decisions from turn 1. We were basically tied in points every single turn. These are the incredible games that I play 40k for. They are so much fun. It just had to be before lunch though, didn't it? I was already tired from day 1. This game almost took the rest of my brain power from me. I'm running on fumes. So hopefully after a meal deal and a sit down, my final game of the tournament will be a bit more relaxing, not so difficult on the old thinker. Game 5 against Daniel as Leaguers of Votann is the most brutal, anxiety-inducing, and closest game I've ever played since the last brutal, anxiety-inducing close game I played, which was Game 4. Daniel is a super nice guy and a legend who did my job better than I did by taking lots of photos of the game because I'm incapable of remembering to do it during games despite it being immeasurably helpful for making these videos that I rely on to pay the bills. Listen, I'll always have to be bad at something, even if I'm getting better at Warhammer. Daniel's list is a wide variety of the chonkiest capitalists. 20 Hearthguard, 12 Thunderkin, 10 screaming shirtless men with big axes, and 6 jacked Steeljacks make up the core of this brutal investment portfolio, backed up by some Votann favorites like Pioneers, Jaegirs split with a Capri Sun Carrier, and 2 Earthshakers to throw some indirect fire in the mix. He also has one of the new characters, a Memnir strategist. I don't know what this really does, and it didn't do anything during the game, so... Dawn of War deployment with the Linchpin primary mission. Now, this map is an interesting one. And by interesting, I mean fucking barbaric. The older version of this map was still heavy on firing lanes, but the objectives were still well protected and you could get onto them and have some safety to try and hold them. This map is a bloodbath. On each of the No Man's Land objectives, you can maybe tow one model onto them from the terrain, but if you try and hold them, you're going to get annihilated, especially with all these amazing staging areas. Both Dan and myself have heavy gunline armies, and yeah, those gun lines were very good at deleting anything that tried to take the center. For the first 4 rounds, we both scored a mighty 3 points on the primary. That being said, I definitely still make some errors which were no fault of the map. I always default in putting 2 lots of 3 Devastated Centurions into reserves and 1 lot of JPIs. Realistically, I should have started everything on the board, used my JPIs early to flood the 2 side objectives with Centurions aiming down the firing lanes. That would also have helped me against what I was most scared of, the 10-man Hearthguard, whose insane weaponry I did not want anywhere near my backline, as if they got in, I'd be brutalized, and they can get in within 6 inches. I didn't want this happening so much that I oath-momented them when they were in deep strike, so if they did come down, they would have to do it away from the prying eyes of my Centurions, who could overwatch with rerolls. I rolled to go first as well, and what do? I played cagey. For some reason, I was worried about my Phobos Lieutenant getting killed if he stood here, but Daniel would need to get within 12 inches or get onto the point. I did that with the Combi Lieutenant because I was more safe behind this ruin, but as there was just the one model, it was extremely easy to throw some Jaegers on there to flip the objective. Had I started my JPIs on the board, I could have taken these with 10 OC, and honestly, even if I didn't start them on the points, just putting them here turn 1 makes them easy to get into combat if Daniel wants to take the point. Dan's Votann could really focus on that left flank, and just like game 1, I didn't think about pivoting my army, which I really need to do. It's only now writing this video that I realized that my first and last games could have been a lot easier if I did what my army is made to do instead of just headbutting the incoming problem. God damn, I'm stupid. This game was another extremely close back and forth, with dice that were doing their best to give us both heart attacks. My 6 Centurions against 6 Steeljacks only managed to get 2 las cannons through, so with 4 remaining, I need to do a lot with the missiles. I do get 4 missiles through, but as their D3 damage, I need them all to be maxed to kill the squad. 5, 5, 6, 5. A perfect roll. But on the other side, Dan gets through my Assault Centurions without much of a problem and gets some nasty long charges to secure that objective. Shrike and his Vanguard swoop in to take out as many Hearthguard as possible, and when the remaining lone dwarves fall back, I can use Raptorial Vigilance to move the entire squad out of range of the incoming deep striking big brick of Hearthguard. Much like game 1, this game was running long, as the mid-game had so many options and things to think about, and there were a lot of rules to deal with here as well. I'm not that familiar with Votann, and this was my first game against Codex Votann with their yield points. Fortunately, Daniel was very good at explaining it to me, and he has this really useful counter that had written on it what the 2 most did. But Votann also get a lot of bonuses based on the closest target, and when he brought down that big scary brick of Hearthguard, things got very silly. He wanted to be able to get a 9-inch charge into the lone JPI on this point here, but he also wanted to be the closest to my Devastating Centurions here. He tried to come in from the 6-inch deep strike, but that wouldn't put him on the objective to get the bonus from Fortified Takeover that gives +1 to hit. So he had to deep strike here, string out so that the Carl was touching this center objective for that buff, and have it so that one guy was just over 9 from the JPIs, but everyone else in that unit was still closest to the Centurions for the rerolls to hit from the Hearthguard's Decisive Destruction and the Methodical Annihilation Detachment rules to get rerolls of 1 to wound and the +1 AP. But wait! Shadowmark Talon's detachment rule, Master of Shadows, is model-based. So to string out the Hearthguard to touch that objective, some of the models were outside of 12 inches, so I'd gain cover and they'd be -1 to hit, which would counter the +1 to hit and the +1 AP. Also means that they wouldn't be in rapid-fire range. So when we came to roll it, some of them had +1 AP and +1 to hit, and some didn't, and some had to be in cover, and some didn't, and some were in rapid-fire range, so there were more here and some not hit. And after all that thinking of strategic placement, I ended up rolling so badly on the saving throw that they wiped out the Centurions anyway, and honestly, didn't even really matter that much, so we kind of wasted our time. I managed to swoop Shrike and his veterans into the Hearthguard, sniping out the Carl with Shrike's claws, but not killing enough of the Hearthguard. It was still relatively brutal in melee and took out most of the squad. In the next turn, Shrike on his own managed to kill the remaining elite Votann, with his 2 remaining Vanguard veterans not having to participate. Now we are desperately running out of time, and it's my turn 5. I need to stop Dan from getting onto points at the end of his turn because he went second. But at least I finally scored more than 3 goddamn points for primary. The problem is he has fully operational fast pioneers, which could easily flip points, so I had to go for broke. Fortunately, I drew excellent secondary cards. Extend and Secure. I moved Shrike and his remaining veterans to grab the center point and teleported a couple of Centurions to try and deal with the left pioneers. And threw my JPIs onto the ones on his backline, managed to just kill them with a mixture of intercessor shooting, pistols, grenades, charge mortals, and melee. The 2 Centurions made much faster work of the other unit of 3 than I was expecting, making me wonder why I hadn't been trying to kill them at any other point during the game. However, to ensure victory here, I had to do something drastic with Shrike. I needed to charge his close unit of Brock here and keep this objective. So I needed to roll low on the charge, otherwise I have to go base to base with all my models and I wouldn't be touching the objective. I rolled a 4, which was enough to do this nonsense. Unfortunately, I didn't do enough to kill the Brock here, but have I done enough to win the game? At this point, it was going to come down to card draw. No prisoners, storm hostile objective. Dan can use Unyielding Aggression to fall back with the Brock here onto the objective, and shoot Shrike and the grievously wounded Vanguard veterans to score maximum, as well as taking points for the primary. I lose 59 to 60. We were basically the last games to complete, so we had a bit of a crowd around to witness 2 broken men barely remain standing after exhausting every mental faculty they had to try and scrape a win over a game of toy soldiers that wasn't even consequential to the tournament as a whole. 2 of the hardest, most heartbreaking defeats in a row, but 2 of the best games I've ever played, and proof that I'm on the cusp of greatness. Dan was a great opponent. This game was so exciting and fun and capped off another incredible event for me. Another 2-3 result, but always improving, getting more and more competitive even in defeat. And I'm starting to get a hang of some of the cheeky tricks you can do, and I'm just enjoying 40k more and more. Now, there is something about competitive 40k that's a little bit controversial that does cause a lot of arguments, and eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed an interesting statistic from these 5 games. In all of my games, the person going second won. And in 3 of those 5 games, it was decided by primary being scored at the end. In the other 2, it was fairly consequential, but is going second really that strong? I don't know. Maybe, I guess. I probably could have played around going first better and actually lost a game because going second meant I couldn't move off points with my limited units. Also, if the game is coming down to the last few points you get from going second, it was a close game, so probably a fun game that could have been decided by any number of other places your opponent gained an advantage to help them win. I don't think it's any more critical than the cards you draw or the decisions you make. It certainly doesn't seem to matter to me. 45 games played, and I'm exactly 40% win rate going first and second because my dice won't give me a goddamn break, and I'm doomed to be consistently below average for the rest of my fucking life. But if you like and subscribe, you can help me reach 100,000 subscribers, and that will surely fill the void of mediocrity that eats away at my soul year after year. You can also fill that void by giving me money and supporting me as a member or patron like all of these above average folk, or buying the nightmarish merch I create like this body pillow, or this t-shirt that a surprising number of people have bought for some reason. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.